to get credit for hanging around the legislature and understanding the politics. And I think that's the biggest thing that I offer. I understand the politics. I understand it. I don't play the game, but I understand it. And you have to be able to maneuver that. So for those reasons and a couple of others, I do think I'm the best candidate. It's not a career move for me. This is a mission.
And Mark?
Thanks, Karen. Thanks, Trump chicks. I am not married to Bob Price. But I like him. Listen, you know what, I think what a lot of this boils down to is who do you think is the best qualified? Everybody comes from different areas and everybody has strengths in their background and things like that. I think my strengths and some of the things that drew me into this opportunity are this. I have lived Congressional District 2, born and raised here. Now that wasn't a choice, that was just something that happened. But when you grow up here, you are a product of public schools here, you raise your children here, you serve publicly here, you serve in the private sector, which is how I earned my living for the past 24 years in the private sector in this Congressional District. You have served for 14 years in elective office, which is a part-time thing. I know some people are talking about career politicians and status quo. Please don't leave the room and think that anybody who served in the Nevada legislature for approximately $10,000 a year is a career politician. You have to go earn your own living separate from that. But when you talk about working your issues, whether it's water on the man's fan here in Pahrump, whether it's transportation issues, whether it's the nuclear issue, whether it's anything that has to do with realizing that the people who elected you are the boss, and when you've done a good enough job to where they re-elected you, to where you got to say that you retired based on term limits, not that you were thrown out, and when you were elected by large majorities of the voters, that's the ultimate report card. And so I would hope that when you look at those backgrounds and you say depth in your communities, depth in your issues, 14 years of public service, no ethics, no trips to the Ethics Commission, I think those are strong things for somebody who gets it when they go back there, and also somebody who has stood and fought on issues that are important on taxes, on spending, and on states' rights, that's something where you can say, you know what, maybe this guy can go back there and he can start on the 15th. Thank you.
Kurt, before you speak, we're going to have a little bit of extra time after the final question here, and Jerry is going to ask you in the audience if you have any questions, so you'll be able to do that live with us, so you can kind of think of a question or two that you might want to present. All right, last submitted question. Go for it, Kurt.
Thank you. Today, when you look, I grew up in Nevada, attended Carson High, went off to the Naval Academy, did 4 years there, thought I wanted to come home after 5 years. Fate and destiny would take me in a new direction. The reality of it is, while people may have a lot of experiences, I stand back and say the things that I experienced across a 26-year career around the world gave me the necessary breadth and depth in life experiences to be able to go back to Washington and understand how it works. When you want to talk about politics and how the legislative process works, if anyone thinks that sitting in the Pentagon and watching it from both the civilian side and the military side, what goes into making the laws necessary to defend a country against attack and against the future that we may not even know what holds for us, I have seen what is necessary and what is required. Integrity, that is what is going to be required of whoever goes back to serve in Washington. I have that rock solid integrity. I had it when lives were at stake, and I will maintain that same standard when I am back here in Nevada representing you as a congressman back in Washington. I live, breathe, and will represent you ethically, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. We are in this unfortunate circumstance because of ethical issues. There is no difference between a personal and professional life when I represent you, because I want your children to look up to me as your congressman and say, that's someone to be proud of. That's someone to look up to. That's a standard I want you to uphold. It is going to be those experiences that set the bar that I believe I can go back to Washington, hit the ground running from day one, represent what is best for you, fight for your needs, because I know what it means to stand in the heat of Washington, take on a president, take on an administration, and make you proud of what we need to do to make Nevada our great state again.
And back to Nancy. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Here we go. Every time I hear a politician say, we need to secure our borders, I yawn and tune out. We have been given the same answers for years and years, yet nothing changes and our borders are not secure. What is your solution to actually securing our borders? And that was submitted by Bob.
Well, thanks, Bob. Certainly, immigration is a very contentious issue, and I will say that I've been around a long time, and this issue comes up periodically, and nothing changes. We have an immigration law that is archaic. It doesn't suit our needs, and I think it's not intended to do anything. The reason is that if we have a porous border, we have cheap labor. If we have a porous border, we have guns and drugs going back and forth, big business. It is intended to be that way. Now, if I were an Al-Qaeda terrorist, I'd come in through Canada. I would not come in through Mexico. So we need to have, and I won't use the word comprehensive because it means something else. We must change our immigration law, and we must do that immediately. Now, what we're concerned with are people coming up from Mexico, from wherever, but up from Mexico. Well, there's three groups of people. There are criminals. There are people who just want to come and work. They don't want to stay here. They don't want citizenship. They want to work and then go back to their families. And then there's the group that do want to become citizens. And we need to look at each of those groups separately. We need to recognize that the security of the border depends on making that movement across the border one that's beneficial and one that's secure from the criminal element.
Mark,
Karen?
your turn.
Thank you. You know what? Nice job, Bob, because you didn't say, you said, I've heard secure the border. What is your idea for securing the border? Three elements. You have a technology element, you have a personnel element, and you have a capital improvements element. And you can't just concentrate on Texas to San Diego. I mean, that's obviously the most focusable place. But you also have to talk about coastlines, and as Nancy said, you also have that thing up there in the north called the Canadian border. But first and foremost, you need to concentrate on employing those three areas of assets that are available to you from Texas to San Diego. And then you move on to the waterborne issues. And once again, it's technology, it's personnel, and it's capital improvements. So when you hear these platitudes about we need to secure the borders, you have to say, what's the plan for employing the assets available to you to accomplishing that mission? Those are the assets available. If there are other ones, fine, bring them forward. But how do you apply them in Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and California for starters to do that? So it's ask the right question as opposed to the platitudes that don't talk about anything else. It is a physical security issue about controlling specific acreage and waterfront, and it ought to be approached in that role, first and foremost.
And Kirk, it's your turn.
While Nancy wouldn't touch on the issue saying comprehensive, I will tell you that we as Americans have taken very complex, difficult, and thorny issues and have addressed them in a comprehensive manner. We did it in the Clinton administration addressing welfare reform, and millions came across the roll. There is no reason why we can't address the issue with border security and illegal immigration in the same way. That's not an excuse and should never be used as an excuse for addressing a fundamental problem that we are having in our nation. When you cannot secure the borders, you're allowing people in that are immediately breaking the law and shouldn't be in that position to begin with. The borders themselves is not just a south of the border problem by them coming up here. It is also an issue in what are they coming here for? Why are we allowing them in, and what is drawing them here to be here? We need to look ourselves in the eye as Americans and find out, are we giving our businesses and corporations the tools that they need and have necessary? I think we a little tilt when we got it here. The tools that they need and are necessary in order to make sure that they are hiring people that are here legally. Because once they have those tools, some of the problem with border security is begin to resolve itself. When you look at why people are coming here, they're coming here to earn money, and what happens to that money? It leaves our country, goes south, whether it is to Mexico, Central or South America. That's billions of dollars that are not being circulated within our community. If you eliminate the root cause, which is why people are coming here to earn a living, the border security issues are going to begin to resolve themselves, but you have to give people, those corporations, the technology to be able to tell. Then you need to look at the Immigration and Naturalization Service, which fundamentally has to be reformed. Having personally interacted with them, trying to get one of my sailors through the naturalization process, the system does not work. It is hostile, it is against people, and we need to look at it and make it a more welcoming environment, because we are the greatest nation on the face of the earth, and we should welcome people here that continue to keep us that way.
Ms. First, what do you think we should do about organized labor in government jobs when the pensions and benefit packages they advocate and negotiate are bankrupting our states? And do you believe prevailing wage on government jobs needs to be changed? And that was submitted by Eddie.
Well, Eddie, I support unions and I support labor. And I would want good jobs, good paying jobs, and good benefits for everybody. And the way we do that is through negotiation. You know, there's two sides when people negotiate something. There's not just one side. And if it is just one side, then you deal with that problem. But when you have people working and people with good jobs, the economy gets better. That's what we want for our country. Now, there isn't any entity that isn't without fault. So yes, you can find fault with unions, but not with the idea of unions. And I think that that this attack on working people, whether they're union or not union, is not a good system. And what we're looking at is a global economy. And we don't want to be on the bottom rung of that global economy. And the only way we're going to be able to do that is through good negotiations and contracts. And in terms of the second part was...
and do you believe prevailing
prevailing
wage on government
Yes.
jobs needs to be changed?
No.
All right. Mark?
Hi, Karen. You know what, the issue on organized labor in government jobs has been profiled by what's happened recently in Wisconsin and in Ohio. We don't have unionized labor at the state level in Nevada as far as most of our employees. Our teachers union is organized, which has a phenomenal impact on the state general fund through the distributive school account. And we have labor organizations at the local county levels through Chapter 288 in the Dodge Act, which was passed long before, I think even Bob Price was in the legislature. But let me say this, the issue is one of financial responsibility. And what we've experienced in the last few years is those folks who have unionized and have contracts, and then we're faced with employers who had 40%, as in the case of Nevada, shortfalls in general fund revenues. And the teachers union in this state insisted, we want you to ignore the fiscal realities. We want you to ignore a 40% fall in general fund revenues, and we want to continue on with our pay and benefits despite what's happening to everybody else in the state. And that's wrong, and we should not have that. And those people should be as answerable as anybody else to the fiscal realities.
And so,